Well, hello there. Welcome to Biblical Chili. Now listen, the cruise is just about to start, so let me fill you in on a few details if you've never been here before. You see, we speak openly about the Bible and our daily walk with Christ, and it's our continuing prayer that we help you grow closer to Jesus every day. Now, you might be wondering why it's called Biblical Chili. You see, around this table we have people from all walks of life, different histories, backgrounds, different futures, even different religious views. But even with all these differences, that shouldn't hinder us from carrying on a conversation. And you stepped in at a good time too, because the Chili Crew is walking through the Bible from cover to cover. And right now, they're in the book of Exodus. Moses talking to a burning bush, plagues, Exodus out of slavery, and the Ten Commandments. Woo! This gives me the collywobbles just thinking about it.
We are at Exodus chapter 20. And so just kind of this one's going to be a little bit different, not a whole lot different than our normal recording, but what we're going to do is we're going to hit each commandment, I think, and Tom's going to be reading today.
Tom, what do you think about, what is your ideals and thoughts about the Ten Commandments?
I think that it's really interesting because there's 10 of them, and that a good majority of them are what our country is founded on. You know, and so there's, and I like looking at it as parts that, that people can hold us accountable to. And then there's parts that only we can hold ourselves accountable for, because it talks about outward stuff and inward stuff, and just, basically how to conduct yourself. So when I read through it, I try to put myself in the shoes of the Israelites there as they're hearing it for the first time. Because if God is already having to come down and say, okay, here are my commandments, there's got to be something that has led up to this to actually have it be outlined, touching that kill, all that kind of stuff. So it makes you wonder what their normal, what the Israelites' social normal up to this point was.
Ten Commandments to me are very important. They are separate from any of the other statutes of God. These were written significantly by His hand. I think, as we see later on, was it chapter 21 maybe? Probably not. Somewhere along here it says with His finger He wrote it. And I think those set the commandments aside. And it's also the first time we see all the Ten Commandments together. I do believe that the Ten Commandments have been subsequently, or I don't know if that's the right word or not, but throughout the entire book of Genesis, you can see the Ten Commandments being seen. Now, of course, it's not something that you see that says, thou shalt not do this or that, or, go into any depths, but it's through examples that we see them. And I do believe that it's these commandments that Noah himself lived his life by, along with, some past tense people around his time.
The Ten Commandments, to me, I think is a perfect reflection of the character of Christ. When God said that David is a man after His own heart, he was a man that was striving for this type of life. Because, imagine if we all had the character of God. In other words, imagine if all society kept all 10 of the commandments. What kind of society would we live in? And that's, I guess, in a very short nutshell, that would be what I would think the Ten Commandments, at least reflectively to me, is. Right, but, yeah. No, that's a good question, starting this off, though.
All right, so verse 1 in chapter 20. And God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. 3 and 4 is, number 3 is the first one, number 4 is the explanation of. You shall know no other gods before me. Don't make for yourself an image of form of anything in heaven above, or in the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the 3rd and 4th generation of those that hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments.
So are you saying, like, verse 3 and 4 are the same commandment?
Yes. because
3 and 4 together is the second commandment.
yeah, 3 and 4 together is the second commandment. Because you shall know the gods. Well, what do you constitute as gods? Don't make yourself any image of anything.
So what would you say the first commandment is then?
Right there. This is the first commandment.
I think thou should not have no other gods before me. You don't have to have an image for that. You can have something in your head.
I was gonna say that the same.
I mean,
thing.
there's Lucifer. You know, you can have images of him, but at the same time, he actually does exist, and you can pray to him without having an image. Just for an example, and I'm a firm believer that you can trace all mythological religions back to Lucifer.
Oh yeah, probably. Actually, I mean, if you want to get specific, probably even to the Tower of Babel itself.
Yeah,
because I think that's where a lot of it's like stemmed from, at least modern, modern
secret
patterns.
societies.
Yeah. Modern secret society. Yeah, right.
Not to,
but and I would, him, but... I mean, Tom, you got a good point, because that second one, verse 4, about the images, that goes into it more deeply. But I think that's because we're talking about two sides of the same coin, where we're saying, where God is saying, have no other gods before me. Okay, and if you must have an image, no images either. Like, I think he's trying to get specific here, because, and that's why they're the same, but they're not, in that sense that, yes, you're talking about worshiping things, but in this essence, it is like, because number one, that first, quote unquote, the first commandment, you shall have no other gods before me. It could be yourself. If yourself is that God, because I mean, if we can boil this down, Lucifer was very selfish, and so he put himself up as God, and therefore in this, if we want to go one for one here, that would be like you are worshiping another god, or obviously you could toss any other god in there, Thor, Ra, any god that's outside of the realm of the biblical narrative. But why do you think that God said images? Like, I can understand have no other god. Why do you think he leapt as the second one to images? And I would say referencing to Israel and also referencing to us today, because obviously the Ten Commandments have passed through time.
I'm on the fence on this, because when I read this,
okay,
it also embodies crosses and embodies Jesus hanging on the cross, or images of Jesus, because although he was the Son, he was still of the earth. And so if we're not to have any image or graven images, then, if we are to pray to the Jesus on the wall, then are we not violating that second
I think we are. As long it says right here, it's a twofold commandment, not twofold. Excuse me, it's a two verse commandment, and it adds on to it. Thou should not bow down thyself to them. So what's the difference between wearing a cross around your neck and bowing down in front of a cross and praying to it? There's to me, I believe there's a significant difference in that.
Yeah, it almost seems though, I don't mean to cut you off, but it almost seems though that verse 4 is kind of explaining what the image is, and verse 5 would be, so it says, you shall not bow, because there's a semicolon there, which means, okay, hold on, everything that I just said before this applies to what I'm saying now. So I think what, like in reference to what you're saying, it's kind of that this is what it is, and this is what you shouldn't do.
Exactly.
Okay.
And take notice, he mentioned he kind of mentioned it. He says, anything that is in heaven above or that is in the earth beneath. That means, like you said, Jesus or God himself. An image or a statue, a non-living entity, does not substitute the real thing. I think that's different than a picture. You don't bow down to a picture. First of all, not really any of us knows what God looks like. We have a couple descriptions of him. So,
trust me, I've seen some of the images out there, what people think that God looks like.
Jesus, you're British.
Actually, it's a funny thing. Yeah, I think I told you guys about this. I was listening to a pastor one time, and he was talking about the images thing too, and he goes, you guys, I've preached literally all over this planet. I've been to like 36 different countries, done so many seminars and about prophecy and about the Bible. And he goes in and he says, you know what's funny? When I go to Mexico, the images of Jesus are Hispanic. When I go to, South America, Jesus has much darker skin. When I go to Europe, guess what? He's a pasty white guy, like he's European. He's like, people do these images based upon their nationalities because it's what they're used to. But you were talking about something interesting. You were saying, so what about crosses? Are you saying that, are you, I guess, challenging the fact that some people wear crosses or have crosses as an image? Or are you more talking about the bowing down or praying or like the rosary type thing where you pray with it or type of thing?
Something like that. Like, this is in remembrance. This is of a memory maker. And then there's those, I must pray holding this. I must...
Like a good luck charm.
Like a good luck charm. Or when you bow down before the cross or any of this, it's not before the cross, it's before God. We shouldn't have to approach the altar. We can kneel where we're at. And I think that's what God's getting at here. You don't need any gods before me. Don't make any graven images. There should be no reason why we need to worship a human figure, because we just now made a godlike entity of our own creation that are now widely accepted in churches everywhere.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think one thing after looking into this today, I was studying it today and listening to stuff today about it, and something really caught me is in Genesis 1, chapter 1, it says that God created man in his own, and I'll put in air quotes, image. And Scripture says that God wants to live in us. I think it's honestly an insult to human intelligence when we try to put the image that God has already made in us and he wants to live in us out here, and then we worship that. Kind of like what you were saying of you're carving this wooden thing, and oh, here it is. I'm worshiping this wooden piece of something that I just, picked up off the beach and carved, now I'm praying to it. I think it's an insult to God's own creation, because think about it. God made us in his image, and Jesus wants to live in us. Here is where he wants to make the change. He doesn't want us to have this reaction to this out here. God realizes human beings get attached emotionally to things. I think God was trying to let us know, listen, I want to be in you. I want to make that effect in you. I don't want this other thing to make that effect in you or on you type of thing. Do you have something, Tony?
I could go on with this verse alone.
No, I just
maybe, I could touch up on what you said. You said something about character earlier, and what is God's character? It sums up as in his law, the Ten Commandments. And if we're to have the character of the God, then you can say that we should have the image of God. If we were formed in his image,
we should be reflecting it.
We should be having his character, which his image. Remember that image doesn't always mean a picture. It could mean a reflection.
Right.
So for those of you who are into Bible prophecy and still learning and haven't learned yet, revelation, image. Revelation.
Well, the word image, even in the New Testament, is referenced like that when Paul said, he was talking about how a man who forgets his own image after he looks in a mirror. It's the same thing, but he wasn't looking at a picture. He was looking at an image of himself, which is a reflection. Yeah, that's awesome.
I like how it carries on into like a parent warning, not like it's a parent, but to the parents. I'm a jealous God, and if you don't do this, I'm going to punish the children for the sin of the parents.
Right, generations of those who hate me.
Yep. All the way up to the fourth generation. I think, and it talks about the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me. That's almost saying like, all right, you got 4 generations of your family to get your act together, your character together, or else I'm going to take action. And if you haven't noticed, there's a lot of fourth generations out there in the Bible, especially the Old Testament. Talks about how in the fourth generation something happened. Either they were saved or they were punished in some form of way, taken into exile, something. It's always the fourth generation. And I don't know if this is the first time we see that or not. However, it is mentioned in the Ten Commandments. most people I talk to, they think that that is a curse. I think that's a warning. You have 4 generations to repent.
Now, do you think that that is a perpetual thing? Because every generation starts anew, and if they reflect their parents, then will it not also visit the 4th generation of their kids?
Well, and I was just going to say something like that, Tom. I think that's what it's trying to say is like, okay, if my children see that, I'm obsessed, I'm holding my cell phone right now. If I'm obsessed with this thing, well, then guess what happens? Obsession, obsession, obsession. And my children see that repetitively. And so that's that, like, obviously this is it's a device, but what if this is the quote unquote, I'll just put in loose quotations, image that I'm worshiping, and this is the thing that obsesses my time? Then my children are going to see that, and that will be, I don't want to say it's perpetual, but I would say that it could potentially be. You know what I mean? Like, it could be one of those things where, I don't know. Alcoholism, for example, ran in my family for a long time, but a break in the chain, now it didn't completely end, but a break in the chain happened with my grandfather. And actually, my dad on my dad's side, and on my mom's side, my grandfather, where he became a preacher. My grandfather stopped drinking, just cold turkey, everything, the whole shot. And so therefore, like 90% of his kids, they don't do alcohol. And on my side, it was my family, my father and my mother, they don't drink on my dad's side. And so it broke that chain on both sides. So I don't know. Would that be 2 generations then? I'm 2 out, man.
Well, I think also that it's I don't want to say, I can't think of any other verbiage, but scare tactics. He's God is a being of his word, and he said it, so he'll do it. But it needed to be said, and everyone that has witnessed everything thus far would know, what he just did to the Egyptians was punishment. And I got to follow these commandments. If you love me, keep my commandments. So I'm going to follow this dotted line. He just said he's going to punish the 4th generation of my kids if I don't. And I just saw what he will do, and he said he did it, and he followed through. So he's going to follow through with this too. So I need to get my ducks in a row.
Although there is a caveat we do have to take in, which is the bottom of, it's the very end of verse 5, and it says, "For those who hate me, generations of those who hate me." So I think there is that little caveat that, if a family's really trying for the Lord, even though there are generational curses, that there's something that God can do in that family, outside of those who are just flat out throw their hands up, God, I want nothing to do with you.
Let us not forget the 3rd verse of this commandment.
Go for
it. And showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments.
Right. That's what I'm saying. There's that little caveat right at the tail end of that. That's like, hold on.
Instead of perpetual, I think it's more conditional.
Conditional?
Yeah,
okay.
Especially now that, Christ died for our sins. And for a lot of us, I don't know about a lot of us, but for those of us who believe that there is an end of probation, and I think every Christian should believe in an end of probation, because it happens upon your death. That's when probation ends for most people.
Side note, I don't want to get too far without explaining that probation just means the kind of like a legal probation. If you're on probation before you go to be judged in a legal sense, this is the same thing, but it would be from the moral sense. So like probation ends when you die because you no longer can make a choice for Christ. You're dead. So, and that's kind of what he's talking about. It's a word that some people may not be familiar with. So, although I do like how you mentioned that it was conditional. I think that's perfect because for those who hate me, but show mercy. And that's the thing. I think we can't miss that here, is that even though this sounds like, whoa, wow, God, generational, whoa, hold on. But I show mercy to thousands. And he kind of goes into for those who love me and those who keep my commandments. Like, whoa, hold on. Yeah.
All right, continuing on, verse 7. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name.
Mine has slightly different, but the same meaning. Mine says, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. In other words, same thing, like you're taking it for no reason. You're just
Yeah, if you're going to invoke the name of God, mean what you're saying. Don't just... It's like any word, like ladle. If you say ladle, 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 it ends up losing its impact.
You know what's mine? Couch.
Couch.
You say that like 12 or 20 times. You just say couch, 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 and it loses its meaning out.
And it's like, why does this word mean that? Why does
Right.
you just start questioning because you can't put it together anymore, and it desensitizes. In today's culture, Jesus Christ, God, Lord, or anything that has to do with God has been used so much that it's lost its reverence.
Abused, if we
Yep.
can
Yeah,
say.
it's became a cursing
Yeah.
factor.
Yeah.
And, to me, it's using using God's name in vain goes beyond cursing, just cursing. It's mentioning his name in conversation, or mentioning his name to get what you want.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Wow.
be aware of these, these wolves in sheep clothing that come in my name. Those wolves in sheep clothing are using God's name in vain.
Right, you're quoting Jesus, right? Yeah. Also, I heard this once, and it's been so impactful for me when it was just somebody going through the Ten Commandments and kind of just doing similar to what we were doing. And one of the things that he said was this: take somebody's name. It's very interesting that the church and God's people have always been referenced in the Bible as she, or a virgin. We should be, a virgin. The church is supposed to be a chaste virgin type of thing. And that just means we're supposed to be pure and stuff like that. So the Bible is always mentioned, like, from God's perspective, God's people as a whole, whether it be the church today or whether it be, the Israelites or Jewish people back then, they were always mentioned as a she. And it was always mentioned as the marriage supper of the Lamb and these type of things, right? This type of marriage ceremony type of thing. And it's very interesting when a woman, we'll say the church, takes up a man's name or God's name, it's in a marriage. Like when my wife married me, she took my name. In other words, she now my last name is Becker, so she is now a Becker, but she just doesn't get a name all of a sudden. It actually means something. What does it mean to be a Becker? I'm not trying to go too deep here, but like sometimes I'll tell my own children, listen, Beckers don't, and like when it comes to like my children, I'm trying to teach them, encouragement and stuff like that. And I say, like, Beckers, we don't give up. Beckers don't give up. You know what I mean? And I know that's just a little thing, but the kids realize they themselves own the name Becker. And so therefore, well, what does it mean to be a Becker? In this case, I would say this may have even a twofold thing where if you're taking the Lord's name, we're marrying ourselves to God when it comes to coming to Christ and accepting him into our hearts. We are now in the family of God, if you will. And here, if we're taking that name, I guess my question would be is, what would you guys think? What would it mean to be taking it in vain? In the marriage, in that marriage comparison type thing.
In the description that you've given me, I add on to something I would like to say anyways, is it seems like when you come to Christ and you become his representative, and if you start using his name in vain, you slander his name. Not only do you slander his name, his reputation, but yours as well.
Now, when you say slander his name, do you mean like, in my mind, what I kind of see is, okay, I am now a follower of Christ. I'm the follower of Christ. I'm taking his name. He's in my heart, but outwardly, it's not showing. We're not reflecting that character of God. In my mind, that's where I see, like, you're taking the Lord's name in vain, where there are moments in your life where you're absolutely, that is not, better type of thing. This is not a follower of Christ. Like, a follower of Christ shouldn't do this to somebody or something like that. And that's kind of the way that I sort of think of it is, I don't know. It was just very interesting when he said that. I'm like, wow, that's interesting, because that opens a whole new realm of complications. So let's say if I were preaching, I'm taking God's name. Like, I am preaching. I had better understand that what I am saying, I am delivering God's name to somebody. Am I doing it in vain for fun and to just get, claps at the end of a sermon or get pats on the back, or am I actually doing it for
the glory of God?
For the glory of God, right, to uplift the Lord. So, I mean, I'm just saying it puts a whole nother dimension on that whole, the Lord's name in vain. And I appreciate where Tom was starting, because that's true. We are desensitized to the name of Jesus, just on a secular level.
And so much so that you'll hear parents not wanting their kids to say Jesus Christ, because now it could be a bad word.
It's a cuss word.
Yeah,
right.
don't be saying that word.
That's sad.
Someone yells
I didn't
out
even
in
think
pain
about that, Tom.
the name of Christ, and you're like, is he praying or is he swearing or is it both?
Is it a little bit of both? Right. Wow. Yeah.
So,
wow.
yeah,
No,
that's just a couple examples.
Yeah. That's good, guys.
All right, verse 8. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, or your male or your female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, but he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath and made it holy. Now in my household, 6 days are the Sabbath day to my kids. Like, they don't do any work.
I would say that, but my kids do schoolwork, so they're working all the time.
I think we could spend days on this alone. This is such a controversial commandment.
It is
among the denominations of Christian. This is one of those things. This is a very important verse to remember.
It says remember.
Yes, exactly. It literally says to remember, and there's reasons why it says remember. For those who study prophecy, any of the commandments throughout the entire Bible that has ever been tampered with by an earthly ruler, something bad happened. The people who obeyed the commandments were saved. The earthly ruler was made an example of. To bowing down to the images in Daniel.
Oh, wow.
We get a parallel to that.
Yeah, so you're talking about King Nebuchadnezzar. He made a gold statue, and this is in the book of Daniel. He made a gold statue, and he made his country bow down to it. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they didn't. They refused, but they were saved through the whole thing. They were going to be killed if you didn't bow down to the statue, and yeah.
We can keep going back and further, all the way up to, the mark of Cain. He committed murder. God didn't like that. And instead of killing him right away, what does he do? He did what he did with Lucifer. He expelled him.
He got cast out. Yeah,
he got cast out.
You need to leave.
Then there's the flood. Everybody except for 8 people listened to God. Well, it was a little bit more than 8 people. Only 8 people entered the ark. Right. We can go to Pharaoh. Right before this, right before the 10 Commandments, before he's delivered, Pharaoh said, "Get thee unto my burdens. You made my people rest." That word was Shabbat.
Yeah,
originally.
That's because he was making them work 24/7. I mean, just all the time, nonstop, every single day, day in, day out, day in, day out.
Yep.
They never got a day off.
And Moses was, he did what the Lord said, and he went up to the Pharaoh and requested for them to celebrate the Shabbat. And or Shabbat,
yeah, the
Sabbath. He said no, and he made a law. And guess what happened?
Well, we just went through that, didn't we?
Exactly. Well, you guys did.
I was going to say there were several plagues after that one.
Yeah, and if we're talking about characters and images being laws, and you go fast forward to Revelation, we can only imagine that. Or, well, let me add on something, too. He thinks he should change times and laws. There's significance about that. We're talking about laws. Even right now, the 10 Commandments is God's moral law that he wrote with his finger. And what is it, James? No. Well, it is written that, God does not change. His law does not change. Those parallels with each other. And then we can talk about transgresses the law. In 1 John 3:4, you transgress them all. And then again in James 1:10. And it just goes on. And here we have a commandment that specifically says remember, And then in other verses also says it shall be a sign. I think this is a very important verse, not just because, of certain denominations, but because he literally says, remember, it will be a sign. And he talks about who's it for. We see the seventh day, the Shabbat, the rest, originally in Genesis chapter 2, verse 1 through 3, before even sin began. And Tom and I were discussing earlier, we see a little bit of the commandments throughout Genesis. It's not particularly mentioned, but the actions are mentioned.
Yeah. How about this though? Like, there seems to be a lot here, but there's a lot of levels to this. But if we were to sum it up, because like Tom mentioned, the female servant and the male servant and the stranger that's within your gates and those type of things. But here's the thing: if we were to sum it up into one very succinct, simple thing to understand, is you honor the Sabbath that the Lord has established, and you let others honor it. You give them the opportunity to honor it. And that's, if we were, is that, to sum it up, could we say that? Like, you should honor it, and you also give everyone opportunity to honor it themselves.
Yes. I think that here he's speaking to this small group of people. I say small, like
2.5 million.
Yeah. But that is their community. If you flash forward into the Pentecost area, just shortly after, how all the believers lived together. That was their group, and so that was the direction to the group of believers that everyone called Christians, and that is a direct commandment to them. Like, this is, remember the seventh day. Remember the seventh day was made for you. God doesn't need the rest. He didn't make it for me. God made the Sabbath for you. Take this day and rest and worship God. Remember God on this day.
Yeah.
And that, so if there was a foreigner in our midst, then they too would be like, well, come on in. If you're going to be here, we're not going to really be working, so come join us for this.
Yeah, we're not going to be working today, so.
And I think that there's such a melting pot here in the States that there's so many different denominations. It's easy to fall into the blend, because on Saturday people are working, on Sunday people are working, on Monday people are working.
Oh yeah,
it's a machine that never stops working. If, like you said, everybody followed it, and there was a day that the entire town just stopped and did this, whoever was here would then fall into line and know that this is how it goes.
Right. Well, that's true.
There is one other thing I would like to touch up on, and that's a seal. I see a seal here. And if you don't know what a seal is, an official government seal, you need three things. You need the name, the title, and the kingdom, or what they're in charge of, the government.
Territory?
The territory, correct. And we see that here. We also see that in Revelation. Verse 11, for in 6 days the Lord, that's the name, made, creator, that's his title, his territory, heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day.
I see that. So in 6 days the Lord, so that's who it is, made, he's the creator of what? The Lord created what? Heavens, earth, the sea, and all that in them is. Wow.
Right. And that is putting the seal on the law of God.
That's in Revelation.
That's also, that's in Revelation. It's also in, Daniel 7:25, I mentioned earlier. The end time, I don't know, people say Antichrist, it's the beast. The beast shall think to change times and laws. What's so special about that? Any man can change earthly laws, but can you change God's laws according to God? No.
No.
So
they'd have to sit on his throne to do that.
Something that an individual has to ponder and consider is changing anything in God's law a wise thing to do. Revelation 3:12, the seal of God, the new name. I should put upon them their forehead the name of God, the new Jerusalem, and my new name or title, character, my new title, my new authority is actually what the word says in original language. So we get the seal of God, and it describes what's on it.
Hold on. You just said something else about name and authority. Would that also apply to the last commandment? About not taking the name in vain? Like taking his authority in vain?
Just like we talked about,
Yeah,
when
okay,
we when we witness to people about God and we say that God says this, we are using his authority for whatever our reasons are, whether it's negative, positive, deception, or truth.
Dude, you just said name and authority. I'm like, wait a minute, we're just talking about a name.
Now listen, just because this is the end of the episode doesn't mean it's the end of the conversation. You can find Biblical Chili on almost any social media outlet. And if you're not a big fan of YouTube, just search for Biblical Chili anywhere and I'm sure you'll be able to find us. Or just go to biblicalchili.com. Now until we meet again, remember, be part of the conversation. Goodbye.
We used to pray around the flagpole, holding hands, back when we were allowed to touch each other.
Is there going to be a time where the kids aren't going to know what a high five is anymore? Like, is it gone?
According to Demolition Man, yes.
Do you think they're still listening? I doubt it. There can't be that many people that listened all the way to the end of the track. Most of them probably skip it. But in case you did, congratulations. You're one of the few. We love you.